Hey, my beautiful souls. Welcome to the Spacious Sarah podcast. I am on a mission to bring back the lost art of meaningful conversations that touches our heart and expand our perspectives. My intention is to create a space where you feel seen, heard, and loved. Each episode is crafted to hold that space, allowing you to open up and explore thoughts and ideas in a safe environment. So, grab your imaginary marshmallows, find a cozy spot under the sky full of stars, and join me in these campfire-worthy conversations as I take you on a journey to places you've never been and spark conversations you've never had before. Let's go. What brings you joy?
Definitely joy. Joy itself brings me joy. I think it might be a separate entity almost from us, but obviously for me, not obviously, it's not so obvious, but for me, joy is something that's best shared with another, a person, whether it's in a plant body or an animal body or a human body. I think when there's a seeing and a connection between two, you often see, if you see some pictures of Christ or the Christ or that person that we know as Christ, he always has his fingers like this, and they're not for victory or like the punks, like fuck you. He's talking about there being two, that in order there to be oneness, there first has to be two. In order to have oneness, you have to have two. So he's talking about the distinction of the living entity and the supreme person, or you and I, that there's, in order for us to have, even for a husband and wife or for a couple to have oneness, you have to have two people. There has to be a distinction first. An individual and another individual come together to be one in spirit. Doesn't mean they become a giant merged blob and you can't tell who's who, right? Because there's a lot of talk about oneness in these spiritual circles, but people often don't really get under the hood and ask, well, what are we talking about here? What is oneness? What is oneness? So I think speaking about really great subject matters, technology, love, death, sex, God, money, big ticket items, I call them, gives me a lot of joy. Gives me a lot of joy to have the opportunity to talk about these things. A lot of people in the world are just living day to day, just trying to survive. And no one survives. It's funny how we all struggle so hard, and yet none of us survive anyhow. So it would be wonderful to sort of lay down our struggles and really enjoy the ride. I think that gives me joy is when I'm really enjoying the ride and the waves of life. This year my mind has been really burdened. I've really fallen far from a place of peace, actually. And it's a good thing to have contrast like that, because then you realize, wow, I love some gold and silver. I love some Bitcoin. I love my coffee beans. I love currency and money. But the best thing in the world that gives me joy is peace of mind.
I like the fact that you talked about oneness as well, and that it takes two to have oneness. It reminded me of the concept of creation. It takes two to create something. The law of polarity as well, like good, bad, cold, hot, like everything. It takes two to create one. So, and creation is oneness, is completeness, is wholeness.
There's a saying in the Vaishnava literature, or the Gaudiya Vaishnava math in West Bengal. There was a great saint named Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and he gave a metaphysical term, which is actually very relevant in the modern sense, because metaphysics or physics explain this, that a particle and a wave can be one or the other or both, depending on who's looking at it or what have you. And his term is achinta beta beta tattva, that there is simultaneous oneness and yet distinction at the same time between all living entities. And that accounts for our karma. Yes, we have oneness, but if we were truly one, then if I did something bad, you would get the karma for it, and so would I. That doesn't make sense. It doesn't seem fair at all. Whereas we're one in spirit, but if I do something good or bad, I accrue the sin, so to speak, or the benefit of my action, which is what karma means. So I think it's an important distinction, because there's a lot of talk about oneness in spiritual circles, but when you get down of applying oneness, it doesn't make any sense. That if we were all one, then everyone would be suffering or winning because of someone else's actions. Whereas we're definitely, according to scripture and many teachers, we're definitely responsible. As you sow, so must you reap. And also the corollary of that is, if you have reaped, so must you have sown. That second saying is often left out. People say, oh, as you sow, so must you reap. But also, as you're reaping, so must you have sown in the past somewhere, which makes it really, that's a very sobering, perhaps truth, let us say, or idea, because it means we're really responsible for what has happened to us now and in the past, the things we can't see or we don't know about or don't remember. I don't even remember what I had to eat yesterday, so it's hard to remember my 50,000 past lives. Why are some people born blind, or why is someone else born in a wealthy family, someone else is born to poverty? I think the only thing to me in my lifetime that has ever made sense was just the law of karma, and it's no one's being arbitrarily punished. It's just that as we sow, we reap, and as we're reaping, we have sown. But that's a very hard lesson to accept, because it's not fun. It's not fun to consider that you're responsible maybe for everything that's occurring to you. And it's not the fault of someone else, or someone else is coming to save you,
But I also think that it's one of the liberating things that you can understand, because once you understand that you are responsible for it, then you have the power to choose to make different conscious choices.
So true.
Recently, I've been having this way of approaching life, and I use the if question a lot.
Wow.
For example, that probably there's a truth there, like there's some sort of truth, or perhaps that is the truth, and then I'll go back and question that truth. So for example, they say in the spiritual world, we are a spiritual being, and then we carry our past lives and things like that. So I asked myself, if it's true that I am a spiritual being and that I live my past life and I will go on to my next life, what can I do this life with this awareness that I have and clear all the resistance or whatever that I can clear, so that when I come back in my next life, I come from a better place.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's how I've been approaching life, like pretty much recently, the couple of months or probably 1 year. Yeah.
That's really amazing. What caused you to sort of flip to that way of thinking recently?
I think life experiences, very similar to you. The last 1 year, I won't say it's safe, but I think I can say that I've passed the demolition part.
I know there's a light at the end of the tunnel. I think I'm coming into the sort of reconstruction phase, which is really, it's exciting and intimidating at the same time.
Yeah. So for me, what happened was end of 2021, I started like having my daily routines and, becoming more consistent with my meditation and my practices and things like that. 3 months into all this, my relationship ended. Like after 13 years, my relationship ended. And I'm like, what the heck?
Oh, I hear you.
I was like, what the fuck? But before it ended, in February 2022 last year, I wrote on my journal that I wanted to attend Mind Valley U without knowing how it was going to happen. And, it's just impossible to even attend at that point of time. But I just wrote it because I was doing the 3 MIQ exercise.
Oh, I love that.
Vision does. Yeah. So I wrote a bunch of things like I want to meet Jack Canfield, I want to meet Vision, and then attend Mind Valley U, AFES, and all that. Exactly a month later after writing it, I found out that my ex-partner was cheating on me again. And I was like, you know what? That's it. I'm no longer going to handle this. I decided to pack my bags and come back home. So after 20 over years, at that point of time, I was in Singapore.
Okay, great.
So after being away in total of 20 over years, I decided to come back. After I come back, you think the worst has happened. Exactly 2 months after moving back, on the 2nd of June, which is 2 weeks away from me attending Mind Value, my dad passed away.
Oh, mine just passed in February, so that's
why I could connect with you when you said that.
That's a big one.
So for me, it was like, I just moved back. So there was two ways of me to see it. That I could sit and whine about the 20 years I've missed out with my dad, or I could be grateful that I get to spend the last 2 months of his life with him.
Yeah.
And I was the last person to see him, to talk to him, to touch him, everything. So I started being grateful for that. And I also feel there's a reason why it happened, because if it happened after Mind Value, I may not know how to deal with it, the grieving, because I did a lot of grieving process during Mind Value itself. I attended like the breath work, I did the breath work, the meditation. So, and I had so much of spiritual people around me with so much of energy and positiveness. So it was, to me, it was meant to be. And then because of that, I also stayed back 4 months. So I was supposed to go for 4 weeks and come back. I ended up staying for 4 months. And then, I think most...
Alan.
I went back to London where my best friend lives.
Nice.
Because I meditated and I just had this download that told me that don't go back home. Stay back here. So I picked up the phone, I called my mom. I said, something is telling me to stay back here. I've traveled across the globe, like half across the globe. I'm not going to come back now and then regret not staying back. So she was like, okay, just stay back and do whatever you want to do. So I think that was really important for me. And then I think that's when I started picking myself up back again. And I also came across this saying by Neil Donald Walsh. And he says that every time you want to manifest something, every time you ask the universe something, everything that is not it will come into your space. And that made me realize, so the distraction, the diversion or the demolition that we talk about is just a redirection to create something else, something better, something new. And that's what caused me to kind of approach life more differently now. So everything that whenever I ask something, I pay attention to what's happening after that, because most of the time it's something crappy that comes up.
Interesting. That's a very interesting perspective. I like that. Good for you. How long? And did you stay in London for 4 months? Is that where you?
Yeah, about 3 months, because three weeks we were in Tallinn, right?
What a great city.
I didn't quite like it, actually. So my friend lives out of London in this town called Stevenage. So I like it there. I like to live like a local rather than a tourist. So I kind of like that lifestyle, laid back. It's about an hour from London, so out of London.
Maria's barn, where I stayed with her, is about an hour southwest of London too, and just tiny little village. Loved it.
I loved it.
London, England, when I was a student, a long time ago, almost 30 years ago. But yeah, big cities for me are not where it's at anymore.
Same.
I like to be able to see the clouds and the sky and the colors of nature. And not that there aren't some magnificent buildings. We visited Mont Saint-Michel recently on the north coast of Normandy in France, and it's always got a place in my heart and my head. But it really was surrounded by huge vistas and skies and ocean. So I think that's part of its magic and charm, for sure.
Yeah. You've mentioned a lot about freedom in your intake. Like a lot. There were a lot of even as you were speaking just now, you talked about freedom, and it seems to me that you are someone who value freedom, and pretty much similar to me. But I think as we grow wiser, I don't like to use the word older. I like to use the word wiser. We don't.
My body is definitely growing older.
We don't age, we sage. So I kind of like that term.
I like that.
So, and I think it a lot of times when we are much younger, we have a different view of freedom, right? And for me, freedom means like living my higher self, being able to do what I want to do, living on my own terms. But I've also seen people use the word freedom to destroy themselves. Freedom means, oh, do not restrict me. I can party when I want to party. I want to drink when I want to drink, and just for people without awareness, that is freedom. So in your perspective, what do you mean when you say you are a real freedom advocate and promoter?
Yeah, great question. I think it always begins with who am I, really? Like, if we understand ourselves to be something eternal and not of the material world, then freedom has a different, we have a different understanding of freedom then. If we think that freedom is just to enjoy the senses are never satisfied. The tongue, the ears, the eyes, the mouth, the genitals, they're wonderful to enjoy all those things, eating, sex, all the things that we enjoy. But to me, real freedom is knowing I'm not my body, and knowing that I'm not the labels on my body either: man, white, gay, straight, old, young, black, white, American, Jew, Hindu, Buddhist, blah, 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 blah. These are all temporary designations. And one thing I've observed, and I've read in scripture and heard from spiritual masters, is that there's a great deal of suffering in the temporary. There's a saying in the Essene Gospel of Peace, which is, do you forsake the eternal for that which dieth in an hour? And we all know of lots of actions we can take that kind of dissipate after about an hour, having made a choice to do something or not do something. And I think freedom is not just freedom to do something, but it's also freedom from. And I think freedom from short values and freedom to enjoy longer term values, which is why I'm so attracted to freedom technology like Bitcoin, because the shorter the system of economic interaction, fiat currencies, the shorter our value systems become, because we're a product of everything we touch and that touches us. We're a product of the electricity. Right now, we wouldn't be gathering around this campfire if it wasn't for the base layer network technology effect of electricity. And so we're very influenced. We may pull open some scripture, twice a day or 5 times a day, but it adds up to about 10 minutes. The rest of the time we're around electricity like 24/7. So I think by being associated with something so much, we really are influenced by it. And I question how much freedom we really have. I think we do have freedom, obviously, to choose, because love without freedom is slavery. So we can't have love without there being the concept of freedom, because love means the ability to choose to love too. And if someone holds a gun to your head and says, you got to love me, you can fake it to satisfy the gun holder. But, it's the same with, like, if we believe that there's an angry God that's mad at us and we're like, please don't, I love you, I love you, I love you, don't hurt me. Like, just don't beat me. Don't beat me, master. There is a relationship there, at least. It's better than no relationship at all. But I think the more intimate a relationship comes, the more softer it becomes, gentle it becomes, more you start having nicknames for each other. Hey, cutie pie. Hey, sweetie. That's why I love a lot of the ecstatic poets, because they have a lot of very intimate languaging around their relationship with the Supreme Person. And people like Teresa of Avila or Catherine of Siena, they were considered heretical actually at the time, because their poetry was so erotic actually when it came to their relationship with God. And to me, real freedom would be being engaged in loving service. So it's funny how my concept of freedom is actually tied to being a servant. Not a slave, but a servant, a loving servant. I'm not always in that mode, but when I am in that mode, I don't feel really too worried about myself. I don't feel worried about my future, or am I going to get what I want, or, am I going to lose what I think I have? Or when I'm in that place of loving service, I think there's a lot of freedom in that, real freedom, or a longer term value of freedom than a short term value of freedom, right? I mean, maybe those little freedoms we're talking about, was it William Blake that said that the road of excess leads to the palace of wisdom? And so sometimes when we have this wanton behavior as youth, or I still do, I'm totally immature. I make stupid decisions all the time, but the contrast of the excess and the short-term value freedoms, I think, can lead us to much more sober, prudent, or maybe sometimes ecstatic, loving behavior that has a much longer term freedom in mind. And I hope that answers your question about freedom, because it's nuanced.
Yeah, it did. It does make sense. And I like the part that you said, you're not always in that state, but when you are in that state of joy and in service, because people need to understand that we are just human beings, right? At the end of the day, we are still in this physical body, and we can't 24/7 be happy and joyful. It doesn't work that way. And I used to beat myself up when I used to feel down. I'm like, what's wrong with you? But now, because I understand that I'm just a human being, although I have a spiritual soul in me, I'm still a human being. I still need to listen to my body. It becomes so much easier when I'm able to accept. And I also like the point that you talked about freedom, when you said about freedom, like the different choices that you have. Yes, you can force someone to do something. If, as example, you have a gun pointed to your head and you love me, and the person might do it, but it's out of desperation or out of they don't have a choice. And they may think that they don't have a choice, but in reality, we do have a choice, but every choice has a consequences. So I gotta love this person because there's a gun on my head. If I don't, he might shoot me. So it's still a choice there that we are making. We are not completely incapable. We are completely choiceless, but there's always that power to choose. But we need to understand that every choice we make has the consequences as well. Yeah.
Oh, yes.
And,
yeah. And
right?
action as a reaction. Yeah.
Exactly. And you also mentioned about giving up short-term freedom for long-term enjoyment or pleasure, for long-term freedom, right? I think what came up for me was that instant gratification. Are we willing to give up that instant gratification, which in today's world, it's a huge challenge because everything is
instant.
Exactly.
Instagram.
Exactly, right? So everything is just within a finger touch, or just an hour palm. We have everything. You're hungry, you can order Uber for food.
Or you're angry and you can just on Twitter, you could just instantly, get
exactly
your out.
Yeah.
And
so I think the more we build our awareness, like what you say, the more we are able to hold ourselves from the short-term gratification towards a long time of freedom and enjoyment. So spot on what you've said.
There's a word that you brought up actually that I have to mention, the acceptance. I think freedom actually has a lot of correlation to acceptance. In the Pali language of Siddhartha Gautama the Buddha, who taught Vipassana, he said that yata bhuta, as it is, not as you want it to be. And the heart of Vipassana meditation is letting things be as they are, not as you sure want them to be or you hope they would be, but just this reality as it is. And just, I think from the limited engagement that I've had with the truth or a higher reality is that the acceptance, I think, in the danger sometimes in a lot of the modern human potential peak performance movements, this constant striving to be better and better and better. And I think within that sometimes there's almost a lack of accepting what we really are or who we really are.
Yeah.
And yes, that even means an acceptance sometimes of old or decrepitude or disease. I am friends with Mohan Lakiani, it's Vishen's dad, and one of the things I appreciated a lot about Bishan and his former spouse was that they always had their parents. I've met both the sets of parents, and I think it's extremely important for a young movement like Mind Valley to have elders around, because I love young people, but man, they can be really stupid sometimes. So yeah, and not that you get old, you suddenly become wise, but it's really, I've noticed a lot of having some older people over the age of 50, 60, 70 at these events is really important, because there is a tradition in the history of human beings to respect the elders, and that elders have a special place. And we really need that now. I think especially with the short-term value systems and the ability to get anything instantly, you can't get wisdom and old age instantly. And in fact, push the old age away. They don't even want to say, I don't like to say, get it. I don't want to get old. It's age, not age. And I love it. I think it's beautiful. I'm not making fun. I'm just saying, I think sometimes a little bit of a hesitancy of people to accept that the body does get old. The body will get diseased. Or even if it's just a minute before you die or leave your body or depart, there is a breakdown of this thing we call the body. Even if I positively think away and take 1,000,000 pounds of vitamin C, there's never been one human being yet who hasn't had to leave their body. And I know that some people may argue against me with the modern sort of life extension, and we download our brain onto a computer, but I think it's built into the code. I think the material nature there's some codes built into this material nature, which may actually help us come to realize who we really are, or what we're really made of, and where our real home might be, or another home might be. The fox in its den might think that that's all there is, but there's a whole universe out there. And the earth might be our den, but it doesn't mean necessarily that it's going to permanently be our home. So I think acceptance is a very, very powerful word.
It is. I think acceptance allowed me to move on without carrying the baggage, actually. A lot of people think that, oh, okay, so this has happened to me, so I've accepted it, but they still have some sort of attachment, emotional charge towards it. Like, deep down, they still feel, oh, she shouldn't be doing this to me. She shouldn't be doing that to me. And one thing about acceptance that what I did, which I was also going to ask you that question, which I did was that I learned from my mentor when I was going through my breakup. Like at that point of time, it was excruciating to find out someone that I was, in a relationship for 13 years. And just knowing that this has happened, I sort of set a timer, and I just tell myself I can't change it. Set a timer for 5 minutes. I bitch, moan, cry, do whatever I want to do. After the 5 minutes, I just wake up and say I can't change it. I kept saying that to myself. And my dad passed away. I did the same thing. I can't change the fact that I've lost my dad. But what I can do is cherish, like what can I do next? So this is what I have done that worked for me. For yourself, or if someone who's struggling with acceptance, what would you, what can they do?
Keep going. There's been so many times this year where I've literally prayed to end my life, to leave. And what I really am praying for is the end of something that's causing me suffering. Doesn't mean I want to slit my wrists and commit and have everything end. What I'm really wanting is this old consciousness, the suffering I'm feeling, the path I'm going down to that hurts like hell. I just want it to end. I want it to stop. I want the tax cartel to stop bothering me to send me their taxes, whatever it is that's annoying the shit out of me. It's painful. I think sharing, everyone is different, and everyone has a different threshold of tolerance. The people that climb Mount Everest have a great deal of tolerance for physical pain. It's painful to climb Mount Everest. I don't want to climb Everest because I don't have a very high tolerance for pain. I really don't. My father he was very stoic with pain, and I'm not. I hate pain. It's like, I just don't like it. I take pain medication, when I'm not feeling well. I wouldn't have done, I still don't understand it fully, but when the monks were self-immolating, they were pouring gasoline over their bodies, lighting their bodies on fire, which is probably one of the more painful ways to leave your body, is to have it burn. and you can't stay there. They would sit. There's on the cover of Rage Against the Machine is a famous picture of a Vietnamese monk burning himself alive as a protest against the violence that was being perpetrated upon the people there by a huge, large industrial military complex. I guess I don't have any advice to give anyone, but it can be can be very lonely and isolating sometimes. I think when we feel that our pain is, that we can't share it somehow, then it really becomes quite a burden. And I think having a wealth of stories from scripture, from religion, from spirituality. I know some people are, oh, I'm spiritual, I'm not religious. I don't give a shit. Like, it's all the same to me. Religion,
Potato, potato.
Whatever. Okay. God, I have no problem with any of the words. And I am religious and spiritual at the same time. So I think having friends, being able to reach out to friends, if people feel like they don't have a friend, then I would be really worried for them. I think connecting with the more than human world, plants, fungal, animal, mineral, crystals, trees. For me, it's whippets. I love the breed of dog called a whippet. They give me great joy. I think the alchemy of cooking something can be very, very nurturing. It can be very difficult to prepare food for oneself when you're grieving, when you're mourning. My mother, who's 105 pounds wet, which is very light, she dropped down to 99 pounds after my dad died. And I was just every time I saw her, I was just trying to stuff like butter and honey and anything that was very calorically dense, because she didn't want to eat, right? She just didn't, she'd lost she'd lost part of her life. And that takes time. Often spouses will leave within 12 months of their spouse passing because they've lost their love for life. They don't really feel like staying here. So they leave. I think my mom's going to be fine. She's really tough and she's got a lot of zest for life. But I could say, that you're not alone. And I think it's important for anyone. I mean, a lot of people have met me and they're like, oh my God, you're the nicest person I've ever met, blah, 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 blah. And you're so happy. And it was like, I wanted to end my life lots of times this year, actually. Lots of times. And I went to A-Fest and I was traveling over I had all these things happening. And there was sort of like this grieving, mourning, sorrowful part of my life that I had so many endings in the last 18 months. And I haven't handled it well all the time. So I think it's very important for spiritual leaders or for people that are in human potential movements to not just share the Instagram, the great photos and like I had the shits, when I get upset, or like, it's good to know that like I put my pants on one leg at a time, and also like I suffer greatly and life. But I know that I don't think there's anyone in a body that doesn't suffer. I think that is a universal truth. There's lots of axioms, I think, but that's one of them. And I think suffering in vain is torture, is hell. But suffering for purpose or suffering for wisdom, it's not like we have to seek out suffering. It'll come anyhow. But if somehow we can try to see, it's very difficult to see the wisdom of the suffering when you're in it.
Yeah. And I also think that surrendering is so important, right?
It sucks though. I don't want to surrender. Let me get some ice cream.
I know.
But fuck you, suffering. Fuck you. I don't want to suffer,
So true. So true.
I resist, like anyone, I resist suffering. And I haven't climbed Mount Everest for that reason. But no, I've my body and mind through some pretty deep spiritual tests. And I feel, I guess there can be some wisdom to age, I think. And I'm much more, I have less of a practice or a very focused practice right now. Just living is enough. Getting through the day sometimes, or just living for today, actually. That's, But if someone's out there suffering and struggling, I think helping, still going to a food bank or going to a hospice, I've always found a lot of spiritual knowledge and solace in going to cemeteries. And when I went as a young man to Varanasi when I was 18 and saw the bodies burning, thousands or hundreds of funeral pyres of bodies physically burning, and seeing and smelling the human flesh burning, that definitely gave me a satori, or a spiritual insight that was like, oh my God, that's going to be me in the blink of an eye. And I have the picture downstairs on my desk. It's one of the few physical, when you used to take them in to get developed and all that. It's one of the few pictures I still have is of a body burning in Varanasi. And I think, maybe if you've just had someone die, going to the funeral parlor is not a good idea. But I think being around other people that are suffering and maybe just can sometimes lift you out of your own morass. It's very easy to get caught up in our own suffering and our own pain, and it becomes like a whirlwind or a whirlpool. And boy, does it ever feel, sometimes the night feels like it won't end, And then we lose a little bit of hope, or we lose faith, or we lose the feeling that this will change. And I think we often, when we're suffering really hard, we feel like it's going to last forever.
Yeah.
And it doesn't. But I know what it feels like to feel like this is just not going to end. And then you feel crushed. You just feel crushed, So I pray and hope and wish that whoever is feeling that way, that they'll discover something within themselves that's beyond the temporary, and that suffering will give them wisdom to carry on this journey of life, and to just try to keep evolving or elevating, or maybe getting smaller, so that you can see the wonder and the grandeur of this crazy cosmos.
I like how Eckhart Tolle says, resist nothing. In his Power of Now book, he talks about, just being in that present moment and just asking ourselves, at this point of time, what problems do I have? Oh, I have this, that. No, this moment right now.
I'd probably slap Eckhart if I saw him, because I'm like, the pirate in me is like, fuck you. I'm like Walt Whitman, resist much, obey little, like the pirate in me. But I totally, I have books, and it's a higher level of wisdom to accept.
Yeah. Oh, it took me really a long time. I still haven't finished the book. The book is just this thin, but deep, super deep.
Brother who reads only science fiction, he had an Eckhart Tolle book, and I knew, like, wow, I hope that's one book that maybe, I think someone gave it to him, but
right.
That's another topic, just how interesting families are. Oh my God.
How can one find peace within themselves?
Practice. Practice. How can we find peace within ourselves? I think that question is really tied to, who am I? Who am I really? I believe that sincerity and devotion are the path to wisdom, and the questions that we ask, how the level of sincerity that we ask them in, will definitely bring answers to us that are different. And so sincerity is really important. Humility, humbleness. It's different if I came to you and asked you a question in sarcasm or anger, wanting to fight you. As soon as you answer, I'm just there to fight you, as opposed to a supplication and asking in real humility that I need help and I need your help. And I'm asking you a question to really understand an answer that might be not what I necessarily want to hear. Might be the medicine that I really need to hear, So I think finding peace within oneself is definitely a dynamic practice. And isn't that something that's a miracle? If you can find peace within yourself, then you found a precious gem. And you should really protect and nurture and, I think, guard to some degree your peace as well, because the world isn't that peaceful. There's a lot of violence in this material world. So finding peace within oneself is the Garden of Eden, really, isn't it? I wish that for everyone. Even my enemies, I would say, I wish them peace. Like, I think when you say salam alaikum, peace be, or in the Christian tradition, it was peace be with you,
Yeah.
and also with you. This wishing of peace is such a miracle, because our baser levels of primal instinct is violence, is defense, is to protect. And peace sometimes is sort of the opposite of that. It's almost like no defense, really.
I think a lot of times we try to find peace in the outside, but it's actually within us. And I like this wise man once said, he asked a monk, how do I find peace? And the monk said, I say yes to everything. Everything that happens to me, I say yes. So that, to me, it ties back to what Eckhart Tolle says, resist nothing.
Yeah, nothing. I think peace is it's a great topic. It's I'm excited that maybe there'll be more museums devoted to peace than to war. We have a lot of war museums. There are more and more peace museums in Vienna, in Winnipeg, human rights museums. Like, I remember going to some torture museums. They're awful places.
Yeah.
But it shows we're a strange species. We're a strange species. So I think peace is what a great jewel and gift peace can be. But kind of calm, like when the waters become still and you can just kind of peer very deep into oneself and thus the universe and others. There is this, it's simultaneously one yet distinct, where it is within, but it's also without. There's a story of, I don't know, one of the saints, like Teresa, coming and meeting St. John of the Cross, and St. John had been off as a hermit for 5 years, and St. Teresa was in community, and he came back exclaiming all the things that he discovered. She's like, I experienced that yesterday. Like, she was just having making a bit of fun with him, but I think we can experience it both ways, by being in retreat within, and also by bringing ourselves and visiting our neighbor and saying, hey neighbor,
Good one.
love you, and thanks for being my neighbor. So thanks for being my neighbor, Sammy.
Thank you. I have one technology question that I want to ask you. How did Bitcoin shift your money consciousness?
Oh, I had a born again experience. I mean, the kind that you think. Let's just say that there's a great technologist named Marshall McLuhan. He's not as well known in the world as he should be. He was very, very, very popular with sort of higher circles in the 60s. He's Canadian. But like, who wrote the line? C.S. Lewis was also a very devout Catholic, and it doesn't matter what the label is, but just to say someone who's very devoted to an idea of a higher power, a person, a God. And Marshall McLuhan was convinced that electricity was the Holy Spirit before he passed away. He thought, like, anything that was so powerful. Electricity is a really powerful technology, just like fire changed us from being predated to being a predator. We went with one fell swoop, we went from having predators come after us to being the predator, or with missiles. And then Bitcoin is a really very, very, it's a very, very interesting subject. I'm deeply passionate about it. I've been told by some people, you can't talk about Bitcoin, because I get going. I can't help it. I mean, it's like, it's said in scripture, and, you jump for joy when you have the Spirit in you. And I think that in a peace freedom technology that facilitates peer-to-peer trade without the violence and coercion of a third party, that inviolable property rights, digital property rights, which are harder, better, stronger, faster than any other property right we've ever seen in history of humans, is that I think that I can see churches and art being created out of this technology. And when you see temples and art being created, usually criminals and artists are the first to connect to new technology. And the criminals long left space because it's a transparent chain, a digital ledger that shows where everything happens. So the criminals went to something else, but the artists, like I went to Bitcoin Miami in 2022, and I did have a born again experience. I was completely born again. I had a complete shift in my consciousness around value systems. And if my value system changes from shorter to longer, then that to me has to be the hand of God. There has to be some aspect of God in there. It's same with the internet, just that this tool is available. Yes, you can hit someone with a rock. You can carve a statue out of a rock. You can electrocute someone with electricity. You can make toast with electricity. But it's such a power, the internet, blockchain, fire, Bitcoin. I think that every time humans are under siege by a tyranny, the way the British were tyrannizing the Americans, taking more than their share, theft, robbery, a tool comes along. That's why I believe in God, that there's this always in history, the Nazis are just about to destroy Britain and somehow something happens. My dad was a big World War II historian, but Bitcoin is a phenomenal topic. It's really, I think you get through the chain of 1 hour, 10 hour, 100 to 10,000, and your perspective on it changes. Oh, it's just this thing. Oh, it's cryptocurrency. Oh, no, it's actually a freedom technology. Oh, it's a distributed digital ledger that, oh, it's a way for people to reduce violence, actually, in the world. And if we're interested in peace and freedom, then we also have to be interested in the technology that allows for trade between two people where another party can't steal that from us or take a cut from it without our permission.
Yeah.
We're at a place right now where we go through these cycles of every 2 to 250 years, we see great changes in social systems. Every 80 years, we see systems change through technology. And then every 50 years or so, the monetary system changes. And we're seeing all of those converge right now. The environment, social, governance, technology, money, all these systems are changing. And we have a lot of threats to our freedoms, which we think are kind of constant. And Bitcoin addresses a lot of the issues around banking and fiat currencies and states being able to create currency out of nothing, counterfeiting, and time theft, which takes us down a whole other rabbit hole. What is money? And, money is our soul force stored over time and space. It's, so that might require a whole other, I would love to do it. I would love to do an AMA and ask me anything about Bitcoin with online with people, because I think it's so interesting. I was talking to some neighbors about start the discussion. Someone else did. But, once he opened up that wormhole, I was happy to, all right, let's go. Oh, and there's a lot of, like any great technology, there's a lot of there's a lot of apprehension, a lot of fear, a lot of bullshit, a lot of, what's the word? People really misunderstand.
I think the myths.
Yeah.
The myths. Yeah. So thanks for sharing.
Yeah, thank you. And I would say get some if you can.
Yeah, I do have. Yeah.
If you get some skin in the game to anything, you're going to pay more attention to it.
Right.
If you have a meditation practice, you have more skin in the game, you're using your time and your energy to focus on something, you tend to pay more attention to what is happening around that. So, yeah.
Thanks.
I love it. It's a I always hope and pray that it will be able to keep its promise, there's a lot of hope for me. Michael Saylor's got a website, hope.com. He says Bitcoin is hope. There's a lot of hype around it too, and a lot of myths and stuff too, but that shows just how powerful it is. It's a powerful thing. Most people, what is money? It's got to be recognizable, portable, durable, divisible, visible, medium of exchange, unit of account. It's got to be scarce, got to be a store of value, has to be recognizable, and Bitcoin covers all those characteristics. And generally, when something has those characteristics better than anything we've ever seen before, it becomes the strongest form of money. And money goes to where it's treated best. And I think so does freedom and peace. And Bitcoin does have a lot of freedom and peace in it, for sure. A lot of hope and promise. So I would say for people that want to learn more about that, watch the first 9 episodes of the What is Money show with Robert Breedlove, where he interviews Michael Saylor. And they take a little time to listen to them because they go through Roman history and things like that. But if you can listen to the 9 episodes, you'll come out the other end as a completely changed human being. Just like if you were to have the Bible introduced to you in the 1500s or the Bhagavad Gita or the Quran. These are very powerful technologies, and you can't come away from them. If you're humble, you can't come away from them not being transformed by them. Or at least be like, whoa, wow. Or start to question maybe the beliefs that you hold dear, that maybe there's more to this, So
the reason why I love this kind of things is because they are timeless. It's really timeless principles, and doesn't matter whether you're born in the 1400 or the 1800 or the 21st century. It's timeless. Exactly. Whether you're born like another 10 centuries later, it's timeless. And that's exactly why I love these principles. Yeah. And
there's something fresh about spiritual discussions.
Yeah.
And I think Bitcoin and other technologies belong in that conversation, actually. So there's lots I could talk more, but I definitely have had a full-on born-again experience through Bitcoin. And it really has changed me in many ways. Inside, I still look the same, but great conversation. I think my life has been improved by our gathering today.
Yeah, I'm thankful. Last one, very last question. What is your message to the world?
Have a good time all the time.
Simple.
That's the quote. That's actually a quote from a movie called Spinal Tap, and a drugged out rock and roll star who's like, "What's your philosophy?" He's like, "Have a good time all the time." And peace be with you. Yeah, that's Bubi. May peace be with you always.
So thank you so much for joining me today in this campfire-worthy conversation. I definitely had fun, and I had a lot of insights while speaking with you because I feel like you're such a wise soul, like an old soul or wise soul. You were there were a lot of light bulbs going through my head, and I wish like I have another hour with you, another day with you, talk to you.
How about this? Well, in a month from now, we'll do it again, and spread the word. I think it was a lovely conversation, and if we can help or makes a little more light in the world, a little more music in the world, I think that's always a good thing.
That's the whole intention of my podcast. A lot of people ask me, so what's your team? Who are your target audience? Like, I don't have a team. For me, it's like anyone who wants to share their story, I'm holding the space for them, and with the hope that it will help someone else. Even if it's one soul, I'll be glad.
That's wonderful. Thank you for your mission, purpose, and time and energy and being. And I want to thank the internet and the electricity and all the different technologies that allowed this to occur. And of course, I'd like to thank the Supreme Being for being so fucking cool. So thank you for having me on the show. And it's really nice to be here. Yes.
I'm so glad. My honor, honestly.
Thank you for joining us on this soul-enriching episode of Spatial Sarah. the podcast that brings back the beauty of meaningful conversations. I hope you enjoyed today's episode, and I invite you to carry the inspiration from these campfire-worthy conversations into your daily life. Embrace the power of connection, open your mind to new ideas, and continue exploring the depths of our own thoughts. Share this episode with someone you know will benefit. Follow and tag me on Instagram at #IamSarahSammy, #CampfireWorthyConvo. Until next episode, keep dreaming, keep connecting, and keep embracing the magic of meaningful conversations. Signing off, your spatial buddy, Sarah.